There are moments in life that reveal more than just the surface of an incident. They reveal the truth about who we are, what we value, and the future we are building together. Not long ago, a black man boarded a plane, ticket in hand, reserved for first class, yet when he arrived at his seat, he was denied the dignity he had paid for, the dignity he deserved. It was not just a denial of a seat. It was a denial of respect. The cabin grew tense. Eyes shifted. Some whispered. Others looked away. For many, it might have seemed like just another uncomfortable moment to endure. But then something extraordinary happened. The pilot stepped out of the cockpit, removed his cap, and faced the cabin. He looked not just at the man who had been denied, but at every soul on board. And with a voice steady and strong, he declared, "On this plane, every passenger deserves respect. Every person belongs, and no one will ever be treated as less than human under my watch." The cabin fell silent. Then, slowly, applause filled the air. It was more than just about a seat. It was about dignity, unity, and the truth that when one of us is diminished, all of us are. Friends, this story is not about airplanes alone. It is about the world we share, the communities we build, the daily choices we make. Too often, people are denied their first-class seat in life, not because they lack merit, but because of prejudice, injustice, or indifference. But just as that pilot chose courage over silence, so can we. Ordinary men and women, neighbors, workers, mothers, fathers, become extraordinary when they choose to stand up, speak out, and lift others higher. It is in those moments that we rewrite the story of who we are. Yes, progress is hard. Yes, perseverance demands patience. But change is born when people believe that tomorrow can be brighter than today, and when they are willing to act to make it so. So let us remember the seat of dignity, of equality, of respect belongs to everyone. It is not given by privilege, nor taken away by prejudice. It is claimed through unity, through faith, through the belief that we are stronger together. And let this story be our reminder: when one voice stands for justice, many others will rise with it. The future is not written by those who look away. It is written by those who act with courage. So wherever life takes you, whether on the ground or in the air, never forget that you hold the power to make the shocking announcement the world is waiting to hear, that dignity is non-negotiable, that respect is universal, that hope still flies higher than fear, and that together we will arrive at a better tomorrow. There are moments in life that strike deeper than we expect. At first glance, they may appear small. An exchange at a ticket counter, a conversation in a restaurant, a glance exchanged in passing. But within these moments lies a truth that cannot be ignored. Dignity is fragile when it is not protected, and humanity is tested when it is not honored. On a flight bound for a distant city, a black man approached his first-class seat. He had earned his place there, through his ticket, through his labor, through the same process every passenger followed. Yet as he reached his row, he was told no. No, this seat was not for him. No, his presence did not match the expectation of first class. No, his dignity did not matter. The air inside the cabin grew heavy. Some passengers looked away, as if pretending not to notice. Others whispered, their discomfort masked by avoidance, and the man himself stood tall, quiet, carrying the weight of centuries in a single moment. This was not merely about leather seats and extra legroom. This was about recognition, about respect, about what happens when a person is measured not by their humanity but by prejudice. In that denial, the world witnessed something larger than an airline policy or a travel dispute. It was the same denial that millions face daily. In schools, in offices, in neighborhoods, in quiet ways that go unseen. Yet it is in these very moments, when dignity is denied, that the depth of humanity is revealed. Because what happens next, how people respond, how truth is spoken, silence is broken, determines the character of a community, a nation, a generation. For the man who stood there, his quiet resilience revealed a strength that could not be taken away. To endure humiliation without surrendering one's humanity is an act of profound courage. For the passengers who watched, a choice was placed before them: remain silent in the comfort of inaction or rise in defense of dignity. For the crew, for the pilot, for every individual who carried authority in that moment, the question was clear: what does leadership look like when fairness is on the line? Leadership, after all, is not about uniforms or titles. It is about whether we honor the human spirit in those moments that test us. The refusal of dignity is a wound. The restoration of dignity is healing. When a leader steps forward to affirm humanity, it does more than correct an injustice. It sets an example, a standard, a beacon for all who are watching. The man's story is not isolated. It is a reflection of countless experiences, visible and invisible, where individuals are told they do not belong. But history teaches us that every denial carries within it the seed of transformation. For when dignity is withheld, voices rise. When respect is denied, courage answers. When humanity is threatened, spirit finds a way to declare itself unbroken. This is why the moment matters, because every act of denial forces us to confront ourselves. Who are we when someone among us is treated as less? Who are we when prejudice takes the form of policy, when bias hides behind authority? Who are we when silence seems easier than justice? We reveal ourselves in how we respond. Do we shrink into the background, whispering and hoping the discomfort passes? Or do we allow our humanity to speak louder than our fear? Do we justify injustice as an unfortunate inconvenience, or do we call it what it is and insist on better? The truth is, dignity cannot be denied without consequence. It is not only inflicted on the one who suffers, it is inflicted on all who allow it to stand. A denial of respect anywhere diminishes respect everywhere. A failure to see humanity in one person is a failure to honor humanity in us all. The denied seat becomes a symbol of the countless denials people endure in workplaces, in hospitals, in classrooms, at borders, and in the most ordinary spaces of life. It is not about a cushion of leather, it is about the weight of worth. It is not about a ticket, it is about the recognition of equal belonging. When dignity is denied, humanity itself stands trial, and in the eyes of those who witness, in the actions of those who hold power, in the voices of those who choose to rise, humanity is either affirmed or abandoned. When moments of injustice unfold before us, the question is never whether they matter. The question is whether we will act. Leadership, in its truest form, is revealed not in ceremonies or headlines, but in the instant when someone with authority decides to do what is right, even when it is inconvenient. On that flight, after the man had been denied his rightful first-class seat, the atmosphere inside the cabin was thick with silence. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered in tones too low to be heard. The man himself, standing still and steady, carried the weight of rejection that was larger than the denial of a seat. It was a weight that reached beyond one moment, touching the long and painful history of being told again and again, "You do not belong here." And then came the sound of footsteps. Firm, deliberate. From the front of the plane, the pilot emerged, not rushing, not wavering, but steady. His presence commanded attention. His uniform carried authority, but it was his demeanor, measured and calm, that gave assurance that what was about to be said mattered. He did not look away. He did not delegate the moment to others. Instead, he removed his cap, stood tall before the passengers, and addressed what everyone had seen but too many had chosen to ignore. His voice was not raised in anger, but strengthened by conviction. He spoke words that cut through the tension that every passenger on his plane, no matter their race, background, or station, was to be treated with respect. That dignity was not optional. That as long as he was in command, no one would be denied the humanity they deserved. This was not a policy announcement. It was not a prepared statement. It was leadership in its most raw and authentic form. Because the pilot understood something vital: silence is not neutrality. In moments of injustice, silence becomes complicity. To say nothing is to allow indignity to take root. To step forward is to uproot it before it can grow. What the pilot demonstrated was more than courage. It was responsibility. His role was not just to fly the plane, it was to safeguard the people within it. Safeguarding people does not only mean protecting them from turbulence or technical failures. It means protecting them from harm that undermines their humanity. By speaking, by standing, by intervening, he transformed what could have been an isolated humiliation into a moment of collective awareness. The passengers, many of whom had remained quiet until then, felt the shift. Applause grew. Not because people suddenly realized what had happened, but because they recognized in the pilot's words the voice they wished they had found themselves. In that moment, he modeled what leadership can and should be: the refusal to accept injustice as the price of convenience. What makes the pilot's stand remarkable is not only what he did, but how ordinary the opportunity was. He could have ignored it. He could have chosen the easy path of avoiding conflict, of leaving the matter unresolved. He could have rationalized it as a misunderstanding or dismissed it as unimportant. Yet he did not. Instead, he chose to act with clarity and conviction. That choice is what turned a routine flight into a moment that passengers would remember long after they landed. Leadership often asks us to confront discomfort. It demands that we risk criticism, that we step outside the safety of silence. It requires us to put principle before preference, and to act not because it benefits us personally, but because it serves something larger than ourselves. The pilot did not gain prestige from his actions. He did not seek recognition. He acted because it was the right thing to do. That is the essence of leadership, doing what must be done, even when no one is watching, and especially when everyone is. What the pilot's stand revealed is that every position of authority, no matter how routine it may seem, carries within it the power to shape the lives of others. The choice to act or not act in a single moment can alter the trajectory of someone's day, their dignity, even their faith in humanity. This story reminds us that leadership is not confined to titles or ranks. The pilot's stripes may have given him authority, but it was his humanity that gave him the moral strength to speak. True leadership is rooted in empathy, in the recognition that to lead is to serve, and to serve is to honor the dignity of others. Respect is not a privilege reserved for the powerful. It is not something granted only to those who meet certain expectations, look a certain way, or carry certain titles. Respect is the birthright of every human being, the quiet recognition that beneath all differences lies the same inherent dignity. When the man was denied his first class seat, what was taken from him was not merely a place to sit, but the acknowledgement of his worth. The denial carried an unspoken message that some passengers were to be treated with honor while others were expected to accept less. And yet, that very moment exposed a deeper truth: respect cannot be portioned out like luxury, given to a few and withheld from the rest. The measure of a just society, of a fair community, of any gathering of people, is not how well it honors the powerful, but how faithfully it respects the ordinary. Respect that is conditional is not respect at all. It is favoritism, it is prejudice, it is injustice dressed in the clothes of normalcy. True respect is universal, without exception, without hesitation. What makes respect so vital is its simplicity. It does not demand wealth, status, or brilliance. It asks only that we see one another as fully human, to greet with kindness, to listen without judgment, to acknowledge without bias. These are not extraordinary acts, but ordinary ones that hold extraordinary power. The absence of respect wounds deeply, but the presence of it restores hope in ways no luxury ever could. Consider the countless arenas where respect is tested. In workplaces where employees labor long hours yet feel invisible. In schools where children are underestimated because of where they come from or what they look like. In hospitals where patients fear they will not be treated with the same urgency as others. In daily life, in subtle moments where small gestures can either affirm or erase someone's sense of worth. Each of these moments echoes the same question. Do we see one another truly see? Do we recognize that every individual carries not only a name and a face, but a story, a struggle, a hope? Respect begins with that recognition. It is not grand speeches or elaborate gestures that define it, but the daily act of honoring humanity in others. Respect is also reciprocal. It does not flow one way, downward from those in power. It is shared, extended from neighbor to neighbor, colleague to colleague, stranger to stranger. It binds communities together not through fear or obligation, but through mutual recognition of worth. When people feel respected, they rise, they contribute, they bring forward their best selves. When respect is denied, the result is division, resentment, and silence where there should be trust. The denial of respect on that plane was a denial of belonging. And yet, when the pilot affirmed the man's dignity, he was not simply correcting a wrong, he was reminding everyone aboard that respect is the common currency of humanity. It is what allows strangers in a cabin, a city, or a nation to share space with one another in peace. To believe that respect belongs only to some is to believe in a hierarchy of worth. But the truth is clear: respect belongs equally to the child and the elder, the worker and the leader, the newcomer and the citizen, the wealthy and the poor. It belongs to those whose names we know and to those who remain unseen. It belongs not because of what one has, but because of who one is. Respect also demands courage. It is easy to honor those who mirror us, who think as we think, who live as we live. It is harder to extend it to those who differ, who challenge, who unsettle. Yet it is in those very moments that respect proves its strength. To recognize humanity in those unlike ourselves is the purest form of respect, because it demands nothing in return but the willingness to acknowledge shared existence. The man denied his seat was not simply asking for a cushion or a glass of wine served in crystal. He was asking for something far greater: the recognition that he mattered, that he belonged, that his worth was equal to that of anyone else on board. And when that recognition was given, it was not only his dignity that was affirmed, but the dignity of every person who witnessed it. The story of humanity has never been written solely by kings or presidents, by generals or the powerful few. More often, it is written by ordinary people, individuals whose names may never appear in history books, who step into moments of challenge and reveal extraordinary courage. On that flight, there was a man denied his rightful place. He was not a celebrity, not a figure of influence, not someone with a crowd of admirers to speak for him. He was an ordinary man traveling like millions do every day. And yet in that moment, as eyes turned away and whispers filled the cabin, his quiet strength revealed something extraordinary: the ability to endure injustice without surrendering his dignity. What makes ordinary people extraordinary is not perfection. It is not that they never falter or fear. It is that, when faced with circumstances that demand courage, they find within themselves the strength to rise. They may not wear uniforms of rank or stand behind podiums, but their actions echo farther than they know. Think of the passengers who watched. Some were silent, unsure of what to do, uncertain if their voice would matter. Yet history reminds us that even the smallest acts, a word spoken, a hand raised, a refusal to look away, can change the course of an event. Extraordinary emerges not only in the loud declarations, but also in the quiet decisions of those who choose to honor what is right over what is easy. Extraordinary moments often arrive without warning. They come in the aisle of an airplane, in the hallway of a school, in the corner of a workplace, in the middle of an ordinary day. They are not marked with banners or fanfare. They begin with discomfort, with tension, with the uneasy realization that something unjust has taken place. And in that space, an ordinary person is called to decide: remain still or step forward. When the pilot walked out of the cockpit, he was, in many ways, an ordinary man at work, responsible for flying passengers safely to their destination. Yet in that moment, his role expanded. His decision to act, to speak, to affirm dignity transformed him from a pilot to a leader, from a professional to a symbol of courage. The extraordinary does not erase the ordinary, it rises out of it. Across history, this truth has repeated itself. Rosa Parks was an ordinary seamstress who, one evening on a bus, made an extraordinary choice. A group of students sitting at a lunch counter in Greensboro were ordinary young people whose quiet protest became a turning point in the struggle for justice. Each of them began their day as any other person would, but when the moment came, they revealed the extraordinary within themselves. The power of these moments lies not only in the individuals who rise, but in the way they awaken others. When someone acts with courage, it gives permission for others to do the same. When someone refuses to accept humiliation, it teaches others to see the value of standing tall. Ordinary people become extraordinary not by seeking greatness, but by living with integrity when it matters most. What is most striking is that these moments do not demand perfection or grandeur. They demand presence. To be present enough to notice when dignity is denied. To be present enough to feel when justice is at stake. To be present enough to choose compassion when silence would be safer. These are not the qualities of legends, they are the choices of human beings who remember that humanity is shared. Every extraordinary moment begins in the heart of an ordinary person who refuses to look away. It is not about fame or recognition. Many such acts are never recorded, never retold, never celebrated beyond those who were touched by them. And yet, they matter. They ripple outward, shaping lives, strengthening communities, and reminding others that they, too, hold the capacity for extraordinary courage. The truth is, each person carries within them the potential to be extraordinary, not in every moment, but in the critical ones. When life presents the choice between silence and speaking, between ignoring and acknowledging, between standing by and standing up, the decision made in those seconds can reveal strength no one expected, including the person themselves. There are two choices in every moment of injustice: to remain silent or to act. Silence is the easier path. It requires nothing, demands nothing, risks nothing. Action, on the other hand, requires courage. It demands a willingness to step into discomfort, to confront resistance, to place principle above convenience. And yet, the destiny of communities, of nations, and of individual lives is determined by which path we choose. On that flight, silence filled the cabin like a fog. A man had been denied his rightful first-class seat, and everyone knew it was wrong. The faces of the passengers told the story: averted eyes, hesitant glances, quiet whispers. Each one felt the tension. Each one knew, deep down, that something unjust had taken place. But in that stillness, silence became a shield, protecting them from conflict while leaving the man to carry the weight of indignity alone. This is the nature of silence in the face of injustice. It may feel neutral, but it is not. Silence does not erase the wrong, it reinforces it. It gives permission for indignity to grow. It allows prejudice to masquerade as procedure and cruelty to appear as order. Silence is the quiet companion of injustice, the voice that says, "It is easier to do nothing." Action, however, is the opposite. Action is disruptive. It breaks through silence. It unsettles those who would prefer to look away. Action requires someone to step forward, to say out loud what everyone else is only thinking in silence: that what is happening is not right and it must not continue. The pilot understood this. He could have remained in his cockpit, focused solely on the controls, detached from the unfolding scene. It was not his seat being denied, not his dignity under attack. Silence would have cost him nothing, and yet he chose action. He stepped forward, he spoke clearly, and he declared that respect was non-negotiable. His action shattered the silence, and in doing so, it reshaped the moment for everyone on board. What is important to understand is that silence is rarely born of malice. Most people remain quiet not because they agree with the wrong, but because they fear the consequences of speaking. They fear confrontation. They fear being judged. They fear standing alone. These fears are human, and they are real. But when weighed against the cost of allowing injustice to prevail, they cannot be the deciding factor. History is filled with examples of silence enabling harm. When communities watched neighbors pushed aside and said nothing. When voices of conscience remained muted because speaking was dangerous. When individuals justified their silence by saying the problem belonged to someone else. In each of those moments, silence did not protect, it destroyed. And yet, history is also filled with the opposite, the transformative power of action, when a lone voice broke the silence and inspired many more to rise. When one person's courage created a ripple of change. When the decision to act, even at great personal cost, restored dignity to the oppressed and hope to the watching. Action carries risk, but it also carries the possibility of redemption. Action does not always mean grand gestures. It can be as simple as refusing to look away, offering a word of support, or raising a hand when something is wrong. Action is any choice that interrupts injustice, no matter how small it may seem at the moment. For the person who suffers indignity, even the smallest action can carry the weight of affirmation that they are seen, that they are not alone. Their humanity is recognized. Silence, left unchecked, becomes a habit. It teaches people to accept what should never be accepted, to normalize what should never be normal. But action, practiced over time, builds courage. It teaches people that their voice matters, that their presence counts, that they are capable of shaping the world around them. On that flight, the passengers who applauded the pilot's words had, for long minutes, remained quiet. But when action broke the silence, they found their voices too. This is how action works. It awakens what silence had kept asleep. It reminds us that we are not powerless, that our choices matter, that our responsibility to one another cannot be ignored. Airplanes are curious places. For a few hours, people from every walk of life Strangers with different stories, backgrounds, and destinies are brought together in a shared space toward a single destination. A cabin becomes, in miniature, a reflection of the larger world, diverse, crowded, sometimes tense, but bound together by a common journey. On that flight, when the man was denied his rightful first class seat, the cabin was divided, not by walls or curtains, but by silence. Some passengers chose to look away. Some whispered, unsure of what to do. Others watched closely, sensing the injustice but fearing involvement. In that small space, the fractures of a larger society were visible, divisions of race, class, and courage. And then, with the pilot's words, something shifted. His stand for dignity did more than restore one man's place. It reminded everyone that they were not simply isolated individuals sharing air for a few hours. They were a community, bound together in that moment. The applause that rose was not only for the man's dignity, but for the recognition that unity had been restored in the cabin. Unity is not the absence of difference. People will always differ in wealth, experience, culture, and belief. Unity is the recognition that despite these differences, there is a shared humanity that binds us together. It is the understanding that the fate of one is tied to the fate of all, that harm to one diminishes everyone, and that respect for one uplifts the entire community. In the cabin, the denial of respect created division. But when the pilot spoke, his voice did more than correct an injustice. It wove the passengers back together, reminding them that their shared journey required more than physical proximity. It required moral clarity. In that moment, they were reminded that unity is not passive, it is created by the active choice to stand together. The same principle holds true in the world beyond the cabin. Communities fracture when injustice goes unaddressed, when dignity is denied, when respect is rationed. Division grows not because people are different, but because those differences are weaponized to separate and devalue. Yet unity can be restored when individuals choose to honor one another, when leaders act with courage, when ordinary people decide that they will not stand by while their neighbor is diminished. Unity is powerful because it is contagious. One act of recognition sparks another. One voice calling for justice encourages others to rise. One declaration of dignity reminds everyone present that they are part of something larger than themselves. In the cabin, this happened when the passengers who had been silent began to applaud. Their hands carried more than sound. They carried agreement, solidarity, the acknowledgement that they too had a role in affirming humanity. What happens in a cabin is a reflection of what happens in the world. When divisions are left unchecked, people retreat into silence, choosing comfort over courage. But when unity is chosen, communities grow stronger. People feel seen, included, valued. Trust builds, hope flourishes, progress becomes possible. Unity does not demand uniformity. It does not erase differences or require agreement on every detail. What it demands is a shared commitment to dignity, a shared belief that every person has worth, and a shared willingness to stand against injustice wherever it appears. This is what the cabin revealed in its moment of trial, that unity is not automatic, but it is always possible. When people come together, even in the face of division, they create something larger than themselves. A community is born not from the absence of conflict, but from the choice to respond to it with courage and compassion. The passengers, the crew, the man denied, and the pilot himself became part of such a community at that moment. Their unity was not perfect, but it was powerful. It transformed silence into applause, division into recognition, isolation into belonging. The cabin became, for a brief time, a vision of what the world could be when people choose to act with empathy and stand together. It showed that even in the smallest of spaces, unity has the power to restore dignity, to strengthen bonds, and to turn strangers into allies. Life has a way of speaking to us through symbols. They may appear in the smallest gestures or the most ordinary moments, yet they carry meanings far larger than the events themselves. A denied seat on a plane may seem, at first, like a minor inconvenience, a disagreement over travel. But for those who live with the burden of being underestimated, overlooked, or disrespected, such moments become symbols of something deeper: the struggle for recognition, the fight for belonging, the quest for dignity. The seat in question was not simply a chair. It was a symbol of equality, of fairness, of rightful place. To be denied, it was to be told, in unspoken words, You do not deserve what others are freely given. It carried the weight of exclusion, the echo of past and present injustices that stretch far beyond the walls of an airplane cabin. Symbols are powerful because they represent not only what is happening in the moment, but everything that history and experience have taught us to see in them. Throughout history, symbols have shaped the way humanity understands its struggles and its triumphs. A bus seat in Montgomery, Alabama, was not just a piece of furniture. It became a symbol of resistance when Rosa Parks refused to surrender it. A lunch counter in Greensboro was not just a place to eat. It became a symbol of courage when students sat down in defiance of segregation. A bridge in Selma was not just concrete and steel. It became a symbol of perseverance when marchers crossed it for the cause of voting rights. In the same way, a first-class seat denied to a black man becomes more than a travel dispute. It becomes a symbol of the ongoing struggle for equality. It is a reminder that injustice does not always announce itself with loud declarations. Sometimes it hides in ordinary places, in policies, in procedures, in the quiet denial of dignity. What seems small to some becomes a powerful emblem to others because it reflects a pattern too familiar to ignore. Symbols matter because they awaken emotion. They reach beyond reason and touch the heart. The people may forget the details of a policy or the specifics of an incident, but they remember the symbols that embody them. They remember the image of a man standing in an aisle, ticket in hand, told he cannot sit where he belongs. They remember the pilot stepping forward, removing his cap, and declaring that respect is not negotiable. These images take root in the memory, not because of the literal event, but because of the deeper meaning they represent. Life's symbols also serve as mirrors. They force us to ask, what does this moment say about us? What does it reveal about our values, our courage, our silence, our action? When a man is denied his seat, it becomes a mirror reflecting whether we, as a society, are willing to confront injustice or allow it to stand unchallenged. It shows us who we are, and just as importantly, who we have the potential to become. But symbols are not only about struggle, they are also about transformation. When injustice is corrected, the moment itself becomes a new symbol, one of hope, of progress, of what is possible when courage steps forward. The applause that followed the pilot's words became its own symbol, the sound of unity, the affirmation that people are capable of rising together when dignity is affirmed. Symbols remind us that ordinary objects, places, and moments can carry extraordinary meaning. They remind us that every denial of respect is more than an isolated act. It is part of a larger story. And they remind us that every affirmation of dignity, every defense of humanity, also carries a power that reaches far beyond the immediate moment. A seat, a cap, a voice speaking into silence, these become more than what they are. They become symbols of life itself, symbols of the human struggle for recognition, equality, and respect. They call us to see not only the incident before us, but the history behind it and the future it points toward. Hope is often spoken of as if it were only a feeling, something quiet, invisible, resting within the heart. But true hope is never passive. It is not simply waiting for the world to change. True hope is alive, it is moving, it is action. It is the decision to rise even when the odds are against you, to build even when the foundations are shaky, to believe in possibility even when reality says otherwise. On that flight, the man denied his first-class seat could have accepted humiliation in silence. He could have stepped aside, chosen another place, and buried his frustration. That would have been the easier road. But instead, he chose to remain steady, to stand with quiet strength. His refusal to surrender his dignity was more than resistance, it was hope in action. Hope that fairness could still prevail, that someone will see him, respect him, and affirm his worth. The pilot's choice was also hope in action. He could have ignored the unfolding tension, dismissed it as the responsibility of the crew. But he believed that intervention could make a difference. He believed that standing for dignity, even in a small cabin, mattered. His hope was not abstract. It was embodied in the words he spoke, in the courage he displayed, in the example he set for everyone watching. Hope becomes powerful only when it is translated into deeds. Words of optimism without action are like seeds left unplanted, full of potential but unable to bear fruit. Action gives hope its strength. Action takes the invisible and makes it visible. Action declares to the world change is possible, and I will be part of it. History shows us this again and again. When marchers filled the streets demanding equality, footsteps were hope in action. When workers organized for fair wages, their unity was hope in action. When parents sacrificed for their children's education, their determination was hope in action. Each of these moments was fueled by the belief that tomorrow could be different, and each was made real through choices, risks, and courage. Hope in action does not always change the world overnight. Sometimes it changes only a single moment, a single life. But even the smallest act can create ripples that reach farther than we imagine. A kind word offered to someone overlooked, a hand extended to someone excluded, a voice raised when others are silent. These gestures, though small, carry the power of transformation. They remind the person who receives them that they are not invisible, that their dignity is seen, that their worth is recognized. It is easy to underestimate the importance of hope in times of struggle. Cynicism whispers that things will never change. Fear insists that action is too dangerous. Indifference says that the problem belongs to someone else. But hope refuses these voices. Hope insists that the present is not permanent, that injustice is not immovable, that tomorrow can be better than today. Yet, hope alone is not enough. It must be embodied in action, in the decisions we make every day. It shows itself when someone speaks up at work for a colleague treated unfairly. It reveals itself when neighbors unite to protect one another in times of crisis. It lives in the teacher who refuses to give up on a struggling student, in the doctor who fights for a patient's care, in the citizen who demands accountability from leaders. These are not grand gestures performed under bright lights. They are acts of ordinary people choosing to live their hope in tangible ways. The man denied his seat, the pilot who spoke, the passengers who applauded. Together they revealed what it means to move from silence to action, from despair to possibility. Each decision carried risk, but each was guided by hope. Their actions reminded everyone present that dignity can be restored, that respect can be defended, that unity can be reclaimed. Hope in action is not naive optimism. It does not ignore hardship, nor does it deny the weight of injustice. Rather, it faces these realities head-on and still chooses to act. It is the conviction that even in the presence of struggle, change can be born through the choices of those who refuse to give up. There is a truth that echoes through time. People are moved more by what they witness than by what they are told. Speeches can inspire, ideas can challenge, and words can stir, but the deepest influence often comes from example. It is in the lived actions of one person that others find the courage to act themselves. On that plane, the pilot did not merely speak about dignity, he demonstrated it. He did not stand at the front and recite a policy, nor did he issue a cold command. Instead, he became a living example of leadership, of fairness, of humanity in action. By stepping forward, by using his authority to uphold respect, he set a standard that every passenger could see, feel, and remember. Example is powerful because it bridges the gap between belief and behavior. It shows people not only what is right, but how to live it out. Injustice is often sustained not by malice, but by indifference, by the quiet decision of bystanders to look away. But when one person acts, when one person demonstrates courage, others see that action is possible. They realize they, too, can make a choice. History is built on the power of example. Think of leaders who stood unshaken in the face of hostility, their calm resolve teaching others that fear does not have to win. Think of ordinary men and women who chose sacrifice over silence, whose decisions taught communities that progress requires participation. The courage of one becomes the courage of many, and soon what seemed impossible becomes inevitable. The pilot's example on that day extended beyond correcting a wrong. His action taught everyone watching that leadership is not confined to titles, that moral authority does not come from rank alone, but from the choices one makes in moments of challenge. It reminded the passengers that justice can be defended without anger, that respect can be demanded without hostility, that courage can be exercised without cruelty. The man denied his seat also became an example. His composure, his refusal to erupt in rage or surrender in silence, revealed a strength that went beyond the situation. He taught everyone watching that dignity is not only in what you are given, but in how you carry yourself when it is denied. His restraint was not weakness, it was wisdom. It was the knowledge that one's worth cannot be diminished by the actions of others. Example ripples outward. Passengers who applauded may have carried that moment into their own lives, inspired to speak up in situations they might once have ignored. A child on that plane may remember, years later, the day when a man stood his ground and a pilot stood with him. The echo of that moment becomes part of their moral compass, guiding choices long after the flight has landed. The power of example lies also in its permanence. Words may fade, but memories of action endure. We remember the images of history because they are examples frozen in time: a lone figure before tanks, a mother shielding her child, workers marching together with linked arms. These images endure because they capture examples in its purest form, individuals living out their convictions with clarity and courage. What makes an example so transformative is that it is accessible to all. Not everyone will write books, deliver speeches, or hold offices of authority. But everyone can live by example. Everyone can demonstrate kindness in a world that often forgets it. Everyone can choose fairness when convenience tempts otherwise. Everyone can show courage in small, everyday decisions that no one else may even notice. Example is not about being perfect. It is about being willing to live visibly, to embody values that others can see and learn from. The pilot, the man denied, and the passengers who responded all showed in different ways that example carries power. Their choices reached beyond themselves, shaping not only the outcome of the incident, but the memory of everyone present. It was a reminder that people watch, people learn, and people are changed, not by distant ideals, but by the living example of others who choose to act with dignity. Division is one of the most painful realities of the human experience. It separates neighbor from neighbor, colleague from colleague, and even stranger from stranger. At its root, division thrives on misunderstanding, on fear, and on the unwillingness to see the world through another's eyes. But history teaches us that division, while powerful, is not permanent. With courage, patience, and humility, division can be transformed into dialogue. On that flight, division was clear. A man was told he did not belong in the seat he had rightfully purchased. That moment drew a line between him and the attendant who denied him, between his expectation of fairness and her exercise of authority. It was the kind of division that too often spirals into anger, defensiveness, or silence. But instead of exploding into chaos, the moment shifted. Dialogue entered, and with it, the possibility of understanding. Dialogue is not the absence of conflict. It is the willingness to face conflict without surrendering dignity. It is the ability to listen, to speak, and to remain open even when emotions run high. Division and asks what lies beneath this. What is the fear, the hurt, the misunderstanding driving this moment? Where division insists on walls, dialogue builds bridges. The pilot became a bridge that day. He could have chosen silence, allowing the incident to remain an isolated quarrel between two people. But instead, he brought the cabin together by speaking words that acknowledged the wrong and restored the dignity of the man denied his seat. His act transformed the moment from one of separation into one of unity. Dialogue does not always mean conversation. Sometimes it means action that communicates what words cannot. The power of dialogue lies in its ability to humanize. Division reduces people to labels, categories, or opponents. Dialogue restores humanity. When people begin to speak and truly hear one another, walls begin to crumble. The man denied his seat was no longer just a passenger to the others on board. He became a human being whose dignity was visible, whose struggle was recognizable. The attendant was no longer just a uniform. She was a person caught in the tension of her role and her responsibility. Dialogue reframed the moment from adversaries in conflict to human beings in need of understanding. In broader society, division often feels like an immovable barrier. We see it in politics, in communities, in workplaces, and even in families. People shout across divides but rarely listen across them. Yet when dialogue is pursued, when listening and speaking replace shouting and silence, change begins. One person's story softens another's prejudice. One act of understanding heals years of mistrust. One honest conversation reveals that the enemy we imagined is, in fact, not so different from ourselves. Dialogue does not erase disagreement. It does not demand uniformity of thought or feeling. What it does demand is respect, the recognition that every person carries a story, every voice carries value, every perspective carries weight. Division feeds on the denial of that truth. Dialogue thrives on its affirmation. The passengers who applauded were themselves participants in dialogue. Their applause was not just sound. It was a collective response, a shared statement that dignity matters. In that applause was recognition, empathy, and unity. It was a form of dialogue that needed no words, only the rhythm of hands coming together to affirm a shared humanity. True dialogue also requires humility. It asks us to set aside the certainty that we alone are right, the pride that prevents us from listening, the fear that makes us defensive. Humility does not mean weakness. It means strength that chooses understanding over dominance. The pilot's humility was visible in his decision to step forward, not as a ruler above the passengers, but as a servant of justice within the cabin. That humility opened space for healing. From division to dialogue is never an easy journey. It requires patience in the face of anger, grace in the face of misunderstanding, and courage in the face of silence. Yet it is a journey worth taking because it transforms moments of fracture into opportunities for unity. Every conversation that bridges differences, every action that restores dignity, every choice to listen instead of dismiss creates the possibility of a better tomorrow. There is a moment in every struggle where individuals must decide whether they will stand alone or stand together. History reveals that when people unite, they find strength far greater than what they could ever summon in isolation. Unity multiplies courage, amplifies voices, and transforms fragile hope into unstoppable progress. On that plane, strength in unity was revealed when passengers rose not with violence, not with chaos, but with applause. That applause was more than clapping hands. It was solidarity. It was a statement that they would not remain silent in the face of humiliation. Their unity gave weight to the pilot's announcement and dignity to the man who had been denied. Alone, his protest might have been dismissed. Together, their collective affirmation turned the tide of the moment. Unity is powerful because it creates belonging. It tells each person you are not alone, your struggle is not invisible, your dignity is not yours to defend by yourself. In unity, burdens are shared, voices are strengthened, and courage is multiplied. The man denied his seat was not left to bear his humiliation in isolation. Unity transformed his private pain into a collective witness, and that shift changed everything. We see this truth written across the great movements of history. When workers banded together to demand safe conditions, their unity turned whispers into thunder. When communities marched for civil rights, their unity carried them through fire hoses, through prison doors, through hatred, and into history. When nations stood together against tyranny, their unity forged bonds stronger than the weapons pointed against them. Alone, each person could have been broken. Together, they became unbreakable. Strength in unity also extends beyond moments of protest. It is seen in families who rally together through hardship, in neighbors who rebuild after disaster, in colleagues who lift one another during times of crisis. Unity is the fabric of community, the shield that protects the vulnerable, the foundation that sustains progress. It is the reminder that no matter how strong one individual may be, greater strength is always found in we, rather than me. What makes unity so transformative is that it often arises from diversity. It is not the uniformity of thought or experience that gives unity power, but the convergence of differences bound by shared purpose. On that flight, passengers came from different cities, carried different stories, held different beliefs. Yet in that moment, they stood together, united not by background, but by a conviction that dignity mattered. That unity spoke louder than any single voice could have spoken alone. But unity is not automatic. It requires choice. It demands the courage to see beyond one's own concerns, stand with those whose struggles may not directly affect us, to risk comfort for the sake of justice. Too often, division tempts us into silence, isolation, or apathy. Unity resists that temptation and instead insists that our destinies are bound together. Strength in unity is also strength in resilience. A single voice may tire, a lone fighter may falter, but a united people can endure storms that would overwhelm the individual. Unity gives rest to the weary, strength to the weak, and hope to those who feel forgotten. It sustains movements through years of struggle, because even when one person stumbles, another is there to lift them up. On that plane, unity was not rehearsed, it was not planned. It emerged in the moment, born of shared recognition and collective conscience. That is often how unity works. It is sparked when people recognize their shared humanity and choose to stand together. It is not dependent on perfection or preparation. It is dependent on the decision to act together rather than apart. The applause of the passengers that day is a reminder that unity is more than symbolic. It changes the balance of power. It alters the narrative. It transforms isolation into solidarity, humiliation into affirmation, silence into witness. It gives the oppressed the strength of numbers and the oppressor the weight of accountability. Unity shifts the atmosphere, turning moments of despair into moments of possibility. Strength in unity is the heartbeat of progress. It is the echo of voices joined together, the rhythm of footsteps marching side by side, the sound of hands clapping in unison to affirm what is right. It is what allows ordinary people to do extraordinary things, what allows the overlooked to be seen, what allows the silence to be heard. Belief is the spark that ignites transformation. It is the quiet force that compels human beings to rise when the world tells them to sit down, to press forward when the path is uncertain, to hope when everything seems hopeless. Without belief, progress stalls, courage falters, and dreams wither. With belief, however, the impossible bends, barriers crumble, and change takes root where none thought it could. In moments of injustice, the call to believe is not merely a suggestion, it is a demand of the soul. When the black man on that flight was denied his seat, the humiliation could have been enough to silence him, to remind him of an old and cruel narrative that whispers, "This is the way things are and will always be." But he chose to believe differently. He believed that dignity mattered. Fly said that his voice carried weight, and that justice could be claimed even in an environment designed to strip it away. His belief was the first act of resistance, the first act of courage. Belief does not begin with the extraordinary. It begins with the ordinary person who dares to think that their life, their presence, and their story carry meaning. History shows us again and again that the world changes not because a few powerful people command it to, but because countless ordinary individuals believe in something greater than themselves. A seamstress believed she had the right to sit where she chose, and a movement was born. Students believed they could order lunch with dignity, and a nation's conscience was stirred. Marchers believed their footsteps mattered, and the right to vote was won. Belief is not naive optimism. It is not the denial of hardship or the refusal to see injustice. True belief stares directly at the pain, the barriers, the long history of disappointment, and chooses to move forward anyway. It is the strength to say, yes, it is difficult. Yes, it has been this way for far too long. But no, it does not have to remain this way. That kind of belief carries power because it blends honesty with hope, realism with resolve. The call to believe is also collective. It is not enough for one person to believe in justice if the rest remain silent. The passengers on that plane heard that call. They believed that they could not simply watch as dignity was denied. Their applause was not only agreement, it was belief in action. They believed that by standing together, they could shift the atmosphere from silence to solidarity. Their belief multiplied the power of the moment, turning one man's struggle into a shared cause. Belief is contagious. It inspires others to act, to rise to hope. When one person stands with courage, others begin to see what is possible. A single act of belief can ripple outward, shaping decisions, changing minds, igniting movements. The pilot's words were fueled by belief. Belief that his role was not only to fly a plane, but to protect the dignity of those aboard it. That belief transformed him from a professional into a leader, from a pilot into a symbol of justice. There is also a quiet kind of belief that sustains people through long struggles, the belief that even when progress feels slow or invisible, their efforts are not in vain. It is the belief carried by generations who plant seeds they may never see bloom, by parents who sacrifice so their children can dream bigger, by leaders who endure criticism knowing that their labor will one day bear fruit. This kind of belief requires patience, resilience, and a deep conviction that history bends toward justice, even if it bends slowly. But belief, while powerful, must be chosen. It does not arrive automatically. It must be claimed in the face of doubt, nurtured in the soil of adversity, and protected against the voices that seek to silence it. The call to believe is an invitation, but it is also a responsibility. It demands courage not only from the oppressed but from the witnesses, the allies, the bystanders who have the power to either reinforce injustice or resist it. When we answer the call to believe, we carry forward the legacy of all who believed before us. We walk in the footsteps of those who dared to hope for freedom, dignity, and equality even when the world told them it was impossible. And in doing so, we become part of something larger than ourselves, a story that stretches across generations, binding together past struggles with future victories, all sustained by the power of belief. What began as a single man being denied his seat became something far greater, a moment that revealed the soul of humanity. In the face of humiliation, dignity was defended. In the midst of silence, courage spoke. In an ordinary cabin, extraordinary people rose, not with anger, but with unity, respect, and belief in something better. This story is not just about a flight. It is about the journey we are all on, the journey toward justice, toward equality, toward a world where every seat, every space, and every heart recognizes the dignity of all people. It is about choosing action over apathy, unity over division, and belief over despair. We are reminded that change is never born in grand speeches alone, but in small acts of courage, in quiet stands against injustice, in ordinary moments where ordinary people choose to do the extraordinary. The applause of strangers, the courage of a pilot, the resilience of one man denied his place, all of it reminds us that history is written not only in courts and capitals, but in everyday places where dignity is challenged and defended. The message is clear. We are stronger when we stand together, braver when we act with conviction, and closer to justice when we believe that progress is possible. The call is not only for leaders, not only for heroes, but for each of us to rise, to act, to believe, because in the end, the true first-class seat is not made of leather and luxury. It is made of respect, of unity, of hope. It is the seat we offer one another when we choose dignity over division, humanity over indifference, and courage over fear.